Canucks lose. And Montreal wins with Tyler Toffoli, of course, getting the game winner. Would we have it any other way? The Canucks looked pretty devastated. They were pushing hard, but they matched up pretty evenly with Ottawa. People make fun of Ottawa. Their record sucks. Their team sucks. But, since they've gotten rid of good Branson, I think they've looked a little bit better defensively. Their goaltending has been a huge issue, just like Toronto. But they matched up against the Canucks pretty well. And when they had the lead, they clamped down. They played a pretty tight game. And they can be dangerous. I mean, the Canucks definitely make it easy when the way they walk the blue line, especially when they have the power play, they tend to give up some pretty dangerous chances. Especially tonight, there were a few more instances of those forced cross-ice passes that we saw open up this season. Nate Schmidt had a real high-profile danger pass. But other than that, I think he had a pretty good game. I'm getting nostalgic for the beginning of the season. Also, I didn't come on and do a recording after the previous game. I just ran out of time. I was doing a bunch of music shows and just couldn't do it. And it was because I actually didn't watch the last game. I watched the highlights. I watched the condensed game. But for me, it's not just about the goals. It's about all the plays in between the goals. Like, for example, I wrote down some notes about one of the Canucks goals and how it originally started. So Juolevi scored. Great to see. I love the smile on this kid's face. His second goal, his second NHL career goal, his first one scored against Ottawa from that same corner. And what did he get as a reward for scoring that first goal? He got pulled out of the lineup, which I've been hearing lately, listening to Alfred Bruff, I believe, saying that it's actually come down to cap issues, and that's why they had to have Juolevi out. So on that Juolevi goal, speaking of details, the goal actually starts way back in the Canucks zone after Schmid made a really fast decision under pressure behind the Canucks net. He passed it quick and hard, past the closest Canuck to another one that was further along. This transitioned really nicely, and it gave the Canucks an offensive zone possession. Juolevi eventually gets it. He has a point shot. The guys in the broadcast didn't say that they didn't seem to think it was a deflection, but even though the shot was pretty fast, to me it looked like it definitely hit a Senator's stick and just went perfectly top corner. If it didn't, that's fantastic. All the power to him. That's two fantastic shots he scored on. I thought Juolevi played pretty damn great. He didn't look slow. People weren't skating around him. He can make confident passes. He's good at transitioning. He's got a good shot. He had a little bit of physical play here and there, and he had some really nice defensive plays. He was great. I mean, what a gift. The Canucks need more reliable players, and he does look like he's coming up with a pretty well-rounded game. And if he could slot into the top four for the next few years going forward, that is exactly what the Canucks need. He just looked confident. He was moving the puck well. There was a Ottawa rebound off of Holtby that looked like it could have been really dangerous, and Juolevi was right there pushing it away. Ottawa goal, they started off, it was a vintage early season bad cross-ice pass by Schmid that sprung the Ottawa rush. Holtby has to watch for a backdoor pass, and Norris just sniped it. So wasn't really much you could blame Holtby on that one. In the second period, both teams started to look a bit tired and lacking in intensity. Pretty understandable. This has been a very challenging year in pandemic and season, and it was just a bit of a letdown there. A few great chances for Höglander, especially an incredible move, a nice stick-handling move with patience and pass by Bo Horvat, but Höglander could not put it away. Myers in the second period, it's so hard for him to get off the ice because you've got that long change. He got stuck in his own end after numerous passes failed to transition out. Jake finally does this little soft reverse dump to the neutral zone, and you'd think Myers was off, and nope, the puck comes back and he's still just sitting there in the zone. He does it to himself. I think he's either like too slow to get off, which is most likely the case, but even when it seems like you have enough time to get off, maybe he just doubts himself. He's worried about leaving them hanging, but just go for it, man. It's like the Canucks playing shorthanded for 5 seconds with you off the ice is way better than you being totally exhausted just standing there. Yeah, I think he's actually played pretty well since the COVID break. I mean, I still obviously don't think he's worth $6 million. He'd be a nice guy to have around like $4 million, 3 or 4 million. It's probably all you're gonna get him. Well, I don't know why I say, you could probably get him at 4. No, you can't. Somebody was gonna give him 6, and the Canucks did. He's, we know what he can do. He can pick the puck up. He can skate. He doesn't panic in his own end. He can make a great first pass. He can shoot. He does seem to care. He really seems passionate about the team. He looks like he wanted to win. He gets pissed off when he gets called for penalties, and I like that. I like that passion to him, and I bet you the team likes him too. And he has had some pretty big moments. Just the problem with him is obviously the contract and his subpar actual defensive play, which is what the Canucks really lack, losing Tanev. All right, so Ottawa scores. The Canucks are stuck in their own end. Just a defensive catastrophe. No passing options. Defenders are just skating towards each other instead of providing outlet passes. They get wore down. Ottawa pressures, and they eventually score to make it 2-1. Ottawa had a really strong follow-up shift after that. The Canucks were stuck in their own end again. Myers ends up with no stick. He takes a penalty. On the whistle, at the end of that pretty chaotic play, Tkachuk does that douchey head fake towards Pearson. Pearson doesn't flinch. He's not a child. And he laughs at the little shithead. Horvat comes in and immediately one arm shoves Tkachuk. Later on in the game, I saw Hughes physically bodying Norris, just pushing him around, and then even kind of like one arm stiff arm Tkachuk. Hughes is looking really strong to end off this season. I thought he had a really, for his standards, a poor season. And it looked like he was a bit injured or a bit weak or something. Just going off of how damn good he was last season. And it seems like whatever was nagging him is going away. He doesn't quite have his full-on speed back, but he was looking a little physical. He looked confident enough to throw what weight he has around in Ottawa. Highmore. I see some people trashing this guy on Twitter. We'll get into the Canucks bottom 6 after in their Sea of Granlund. But Highmore had a really quick, smart defensive zone pass that got Sutter in deep. It's not flashy. It's not even something that's going to get him an assist. But he does do the right things. He's also shown some confidence. He can pick the puck up. He can wheel back. He had some good zone entries and neutral zone transitions. He's physical. He plays decent defense. I think he honestly is going to give you more shots than Gaudette would. And he's definitely going to take away more shots, and he can play on the top 3 lines. I mean, obviously, the best case scenario, you want him on the 4th line, maybe the 3rd, but they could throw him in the top 6, and he makes some things happen. I think he definitely has generated more shots than Gaudette did. Mott, Höglander, and Miller were on the ice together for a little bit. Miller as a 3rd-line center with those guys down the line. So you'd have Pettersson and maybe Besser, I guess. And then you could have a 2nd line of Horvat and Pearson. And then you got Miller and Mott and either Höglander or maybe Podkolzin. Maybe Cole Lind fits on one of those top 2 lines. Maybe Jonah Gadjevich. Also, speaking of Gadjevich, I was reading Drance's article in The Athletic about the Canucks expansion, not dilemma, but what they're going to have to do. And in his mock-up, he had Jonah Gadjevich not being protected. And because you've signed Pearson, you're going to want to protect him. I mean, unless Seattle takes him. I like Pearson. And you probably could have paid him a little bit less. Definitely. I mean, $500,000 less. It's not a terrible contract. He's younger than people think. People act like he's 30, 31. But he's not. I love the way he plays. He's a tough guy. He makes good passes, good plays. He rarely ever makes mistakes out there, and he can score. And he's the kind of guy that could score in the playoffs. And he's won a Stanley Cup before. and was a decent part of that. Anyways, so now you got to protect Pearson, Miller, Pettersson, Besser. Maybe Pettersson you don't have to protect. Right, so it's probably more like Miller, Horvat, Höglander. No, you probably don't have to protect him. Anyways, I'm not in the weeds of this stuff, but what I saw was that the list did not have Jonah Gadjovich on it. And Gadjovich has been ripping it up in the AHL. The guy's got 11 goals in 14 games down there. The knock on him has always been his speed. He's been working really hard on it and working on getting back to the basics, he was saying, and finding his way to be effective with his game again. We haven't even seen him in the NHL, and there's a possibility the Canucks could lose him, and that would just really be heartbreaking. On a team that doesn't really have much depth, you're going to lose potentially somebody that maybe could play in your top 9. A young, cheap guy that could score. That's exactly what they need. Maybe he could be like another Pearson. Not the fastest guy, but can score. Got a nose for the net and maybe has some other intangibles. I really hope they don't lose him. I'd be so pissed if they lost him or Mott. But, just please, can you expose Jake? That'd be fucking wonderful if they took Jake. Jake was Jake. I'm not going to waste time talking about him anymore. He's a hazard to this team. Signing him probably fucked them up and made them lose, contributed to them losing to Foley. It's caused all kind of issues. I don't want to talk about Virtanen anymore at all. Anyways, speaking of Virtanen though, I know I just said I don't want to talk about him anymore. He got into a fight. It was a really weird one. It was one of those kind of right off the beginning of the game. Looked like maybe he wanted to spark something. And then he's just kind of chatting with the guy after. I think they gave each other a, hey, good job right after the fight. And then they're both sitting in the penalty box just having a little chin wag. It's not really, people want to see Jake hit and fight, but they want to see intensity. Not necessarily, let's just do this to get, maybe get in our coach's good graces. And that Ottawa coach, he looks like a real hard ass. But he's a good coach. He's done a lot with not a lot. Sutter really surprised me. At one point, he had a ton of speed flying down the middle. You don't see that too often, but he does have a bit of speed. So overall, let's go back to this bottom 6. What do we got? What do we got on this line? VC, Hawryluk, Michaelis, Boyd. Okay, let me write these down. Let's go through them. VC, Michaelis, Hawryluk, Boyd. Let's say McEwen. And I think that's about it, isn't it? God, that's a lot. And Highmore. I think that Highmore is definitely the best of the bunch. I haven't really gotten a feel for what Boyd does. I see a lot of people on Twitter talking about how they like him. I liked VC when he first came because when VC first showed up in the Canucks, he had speed. He could stick handle like a motherfucker. And I thought he might be a really cheap replacement when you need it in the top 6. But he's definitely not defensively good enough to play in the bottom 6. And he played like dog shit in this game in the last couple of games. And you don't want to be super hard on the Canucks because of COVID and everything they've went through and the schedule they're going to have to go through. But, somebody's got to make some plays. And I wouldn't want to see the Canucks give this guy any money. Michaelis, I'd rather see Michaelis because on a 2-way contract, I think he'd be happy to get it. He could play down in Utica and you could bring him up when you need him. I don't think Michaelis makes many mistakes. I think he's got decent enough speed. He doesn't hurt you. And he can move the puck a little bit. Hawryluk, same thing too. Hawryluk had kind of a rough game. I've been a big Hawryluk supporter because I was just so ready to see anybody other than Sutter and Roussel in that bottom 6. And Gaudette too. And I thought that Hawryluk and Michaelis had a strong showing in the first couple games. And now it just seems like Hawryluk really ran out of gas in this one. And he was making some uncharacteristically bad decisions and just wasn't really offering much else. And I think that Highmore has basically market corrected him. I think Highmore's come in and has the similar number, 15 to 13, and he is a better version. Highmore's faster. I think he's tougher. He gets in. I think he has a better offensive instincts, and he's a guy that could be on your fourth line when your team is really rolling. And I think he could play, fourth or third line. You don't really want him in your top six, obviously, for any extended period of time, but I think he makes things happen in a really non-flashy way, in a way that's not necessarily always going to get you assists. So I've liked him so far. I mean, you do have to divorce him from the idea of what Gaudette could be, but I don't think Gaudette really thought the NHL game too well anyway. He can be a fun player to watch, but he can also be a very frustrating player to watch. Gaudette, that is, because he's fast. He has a good shot. He can pass, but he just never really seemed to figure out. At least this season, he really, really struggled making anything happen. And I know that most of the time he didn't play with offensively calibrated players. He stuck with Sutter, but he also got a ton of chances in the top six. In the last couple of years, his team has been crying out for more wingers in the top six, and Virtanen and Gaudette have got plenty of chances because this team is not stacked. It's not like they're playing in Tampa and they're getting bumped down to the third and fourth line like JT Miller was there. There's plenty of chances. Horvat's been dying to have some wingers to play with over the past couple of years. Louis was playing in the top six. All right? So these guys have had their chances. McEwen, I thought he had a much better season this year. Definitely improved in the playoffs. He's big. He fights. I think he's fairly smart. He is a little bit less responsible than Highmore. And he's kind of more of like a high event player. I think you notice McEwen more, and I think people really like him because he is kind of that traditional enforcer type. He's noticeable on the ice because he's so big. I think he's pretty intimidating, and he seems happy to grab people and punch their face, which is nice to have. I'd say keep him around. I think that he could be a fringe guy. On that taxi squad in the AHL. Put him on a two-way contract, kind of have him rotating in and out of the lineup when you feel like you need him. But Highmore, I think, could have a more regular spot. Michaelis, very fringe, maybe on the fourth line. Howrluck, very fringe. VC, I think VC's going to be one of these guys that's got a bit of an attitude, and he thinks that he should be getting a lot more than he is. If you haven't read the amazing hockey book, The Game, written by Ken Dryden, he talks about how there's always these players that come through on the roster, and they were incredible scoring stars all throughout their pre-NHL careers in junior, college, whatever. I don't even know if they had college players back then. Anyways, these players Scotty Bowman, the coach they had back then, I believe, he'd have them in and out of the lineup a lot. And he'd bring him in. They'd play amazing. They'd be trying to win that spot, and they'd reach their potential. And after a couple of games, they'd always dip down, and their bad habits would come back in, and just their lack of tenacity, their lack of pushing it. Like, if you have skill, there's a lot of things you can do in a practice. But hockey and professional sports are about how are you going to react when you're dead tired and the game is on your stick and you got to make a good play. When you're dead tired, everything is different. Just go outside and do some wind sprints. Do a bunch of squats until near failure and then try to make a decision. And that is what separates people. And that's what Ken Dryden wrote about so well with these players. And I think that VC is one of those guys that he's got the skill, or Jake too. They've got skill. Obviously, you can see it when they pick up the puck and they go for a little skate. They can kind of shock you with their speed and the way they can get around guys. But then it comes down to, are they thinking the game at a high speed in a smart way, letting the game come to them when they need to, making things happen when they need to. You see Miller struggle with it sometimes too, but I think in Miller's case is that he really wants to win more than probably anyone on the team. And him and Horvat are just trying to put the team on their shoulders and push forward. And when you've got VC on your wing and you've had a few plays just not work out, you can see why Miller just tries to do it all himself. But Ottawa was keying in on that. They play a good system. And now the good Branson's gone, their defense has improved. And they knew when Miller was going to try to take on three of them, and they just collapsed and took them out. So, but I mean, all these guys, it's nothing to worry about. Michaelis, VC, Howard, Boyd, whatever. Those guys were stopgaps. They were signed because the Canucks knew they were going to lose some players, and because they knew they needed more depth, and they needed guys to be extremely cheap because they have no salary cap room. So, and luckily he hasn't signed anybody to a long-term contract yet. It's pretty unbelievable. We've gone this long with him not overpaying somebody. Although I just mentioned he got criticized for Demko, 5 years, $5 million, a goalie that has, if, and it's a big if he continues to be as good as we've seen this season in a very small sample size and in the playoffs, and keeps improving a little bit but can stay consistent, it's a great deal. And if it's anything less than great, you are now stuck with a $5 million goaltender for 5 years. I have faith in Thatcher, though. I think he's got a good head for the game. But what if they lose Ian Clark? Well, I'll be so pissed if they lose Ian Clark. But I also wouldn't be surprised. I think this management, this owner, they just let things go past them without a plan. Travis Green, no contract yet. You're just letting this guy hang out. And that weighs on people, man. Do you want him there or not? Earlier in the season, when the Canucks were playing terrible, Montreal was struggling and Calgary was struggling, I saw Montreal and Calgary made a really quick coaching change, and I thought maybe the Canucks need to do that. Because it seemed to work at first. Montreal and Calgary seemed to have some bounce back, and I thought, yeah, maybe that's what the winning teams do. Remember, Jersey did it right before they won their Stanley Cup in 2000, even though they were one of the best teams in the league points-wise. But Lou Lamoriello wasn't feeling the coach. Robbie Ftorek chucked them, with 10 games to go or something. Brought in Larry Robinson, they won a cup. I remember that because I watched that year because McGillney got traded from the Canucks to the Devils, and I got to watch a team win the Stanley Cup, and it was amazing, especially because they beat my little brother's favorite team, the Dallas Stars, in the final with his favorite player, Brett Hull. But then I felt the agony of defeat the next year when the Devils went to the final and lost to bloody Colorado and big, stupid old Ray Bourque. Anyways, but now that you've seen Montreal and Calgary just flounder, just disintegrate, after such promising starts and on paper looking like pretty good teams, and Toffoli's still having a good year in Montreal. I guess they're missing Gallagher, right? He's injured. He's a great player. Real glue guy. One of those guys that you might think, oh, he gets overpaid. But it's not about, hockey is not just about the highlights and the goals. It's about the plays in between. And he's one of those guys that makes everyone on his roster better. So, in that sense, you might as well stick with Green. He seems to understand the team. They haven't really had a lot of success, but they haven't really given him much of a roster to work with. I feel like he's sharpened up his defensive problems, although this game was a whole lot of bad habits coming back. Like I said before, about the forced cross-ice passes, especially in the offensive zone. One leading to a goal tonight. And just the defensive breakdowns where it looks like the players don't know where to go, what to do, how the hell they're going to get out of this situation. But come on. We've had this crazy season for the Canucks, the big layoff. People got a variant of COVID. I was feeling really sick today. I think I had a bit of sunstroke, heat stroke. My girlfriend thought I had COVID. She was wearing a mask and shut me out into the bedroom. Put my food down and ran away just because I was feeling nauseous for a few hours. And I felt like I wanted to die. That was just from, I was probably dehydrated and my stomach hurt. I can't imagine these guys then having to compete at the highest level you'll ever compete in your life, that some people will never, ever compete at. So I'm going to cut him a lot of slack. Next thing to look forward to, let's get Koland up there. Let's get Jonah Gadjevich up there. DiPietro's down in the minors. Demko's hurt. But I think what we're going to be looking for towards this offseason is, what are they going to do with Green? I think they should sign him. I think he's done well. He's had what, like three great rookies, 3 years in a row. I mean, if they could bring in somebody better, sure, but I don't think this team is going to be bringing in anybody better that costs more money. So, best case scenario for this management group, and by that I mean the owner, is to keep Green. Please keep Ian Clark. The guy has shown without a shadow of a doubt that he is incredibly underpaid no matter what kind of raise you give him, because goalie coaches don't get the respect they deserve. Just look at the results he's had with Markstrom, Demko, Holtby now, and the players that he used to coach and left him, and they're playing just dove down. Markstrom's not looking so great in Calgary right now, is he? But I think they're going to lose him. I think they'll sign Green because I don't think Green wants to move. And I think he's going to get a bit. I mean, he's still new in the league, right? And there's a lot of coaches that never get another chance. And he didn't really have a winning record, other than get a nice surprise playoff run that was in a year that was an aberration. But I think they'll bring him back because they both want to come back. Ian Clark, I think, is probably pissed off and will probably have a lot of teams throwing some money at him. And I really hope they don't lose Gadjevich or Lind or Mott in the expansion draft. I'd be so happy if Seattle selects. Oh my God. Can you just imagine that if they selected Jake or Myers? But they'll protect Myers. You know they will. Oh, and that means, so if they protect, so you can either have 8 skaters total, or you can have 7 forwards and 3 defensemen. So if they protect Myers, which is stupid, and Juolevi, which absolutely they have to, and Schmid, that means that they might lose Chatfield. And Chatfield's been solid. Tell you what, I'd rather see Chatfield on the ice than Myers. And it makes a lot more sense with the salary cap. So if they lose Chatfield and Gadjevich, oh boy. It's just frustrating because we haven't seen a core like this in the team in a while. The potential of a Pettersson, Miller, Horvat, Höglander, Pearson to some extent, Brock Besser, Quinn Hughes, Thatcher Demko, Nate Schmidt. This is a core that, with the right pieces in the bottom 6 and a few more on defense, man, a Tyler Toffoli type perhaps, maybe a Chris Tanev type. This team could be really exciting to watch in the playoffs for years. And it really feels like the owner / Benning might screw it up. And I'm going to blame the owner more than Benning, because Benning put this team together. He's responsible for Miller and Pettersson and Hughes and Höglander and Podkolzin and Juolevi. So you got to give him credit there. He's also responsible for other... Oh, and Schmid. And then Myers. And Toffoli and Tanev not being there. And Stetcher. Jesus. This team... I mean, loving any kind of sports team is going to be frustrating. You just have to take the good from it. And the good tonight is that this team played as a team. They couldn't get it done. And I don't fault them for it. I liked their effort. I liked what they did. And I really was happy with Juolevi moving forward. And even Highmore. So, for me, I really wish I watched last game. That looked a lot more exciting. But we'll see what happens. Were they playing Ottawa 1 or 2 more times? And then one more time, I think, with Ottawa. And then Toronto back to back. That'll be a real test. If there's a couple more here, we're going to start seeing some more kids in the lineup. Thank you very much if you watched this. And let me know what you thought.